Hi, my name's Igor Skwarczynski, and this is my Unreal game walkthrough slash commentary thing. So yeah, I'm gonna get started now. So the first thing that you'll be able to see when my game starts is obviously you fall into the water, it makes a sound effect, and bubble particles begin to spawn. So I created the bubble particles by making a particle system. Then I created a particle component within my playable character blueprint, and how they appear is when the player is below a certain height on the Z-axis, they begin to spawn by setting the bubbles actor component to active within the blueprint. And the second thing that you can see, well, or the first, I don't know which one you noticed first, is post-processing. The underwater sort of like changes to blue, and effects such as bloom, depth of field and motion blur are enabled. So I did this by putting a post-process volume underneath the water plane, it's basically making it as big as this entire underwater lake pond area. And I died like 3 times so far. So you die by running out of oxygen, and you run out of oxygen by well, you run out of oxygen by being underwater for a long time, but I did this by having an oxygen float variable, which starts ticking down once a player is below a certain point on the Z-axis. It's the same point as the bubble particle spawning point. So yeah, basically once you're underwater, you start to lose oxygen. And once the variable reaches 0, the level is restarted after a short delay of 1 second. And if the player manages to get underwater, I'm about to right now, the oxygen is reset back to its original value of 1000, so the player doesn't die, and they are able to continue on with the level. So the next thing I'm going to see is the UI, and I created the UI by making a widget blueprint. I then created a trigger box, which I'm colliding with right now. And upon collision, the game creates a UI widget that I want. You know, I've got multiple UI widgets, so this is the UI widget one. And it adds it to the viewport, and after a short delay it gets removed, so yeah. My matinee sequence. I created a matinee sequence for this door opening, well, this gate opening, and the other gate opening, but the small gate is the one that gets triggered first. So how you trigger it is you jump on top of this fountain, and you know there's meant to be like a hidden button underneath the water, and you jump on top of the fountain, and a cutscene plays. Well, not a cutscene, sorry, not a cutscene, that's the other gate. The matinee plays, and how I did that is I created an empty group, and I attached the gate actor to it. And on the first frame of the matinee animation, the gate is closed, like it is right now. And on the last frame, it is open, so it should open once I step over this button. As you can see, another UI widget right here. And the sound. The sound, how I did it, how I set up the sound in my game is the clicked button sounds and the fountain sounds are linked to the trigger box. So the sound cues get played once I step over the trigger box with on top of the fountain. Whereas the gate sound, that's linked directly to the matinee, so that sound only plays once the matinee is played. That kind of makes sense. And also the fountain sound, it's a constant looping sound, and you know, because the water doesn't stop trickling. And so if I walked away from it previously, it just continued to play like in the other room, but how I set it up, I gave it an attenuation setting, so once I step out of this room, you know, it gets quieter, and once I step out from it far away enough, like, it gets muted. And yeah, I've got another post-process volume here, which basically adds vignetting, I think, and no idea. So yeah, gives it a, I don't know, claustrophobic effect, because, you know, tight labyrinth and stuff. I also added blur, really blurry. So we're getting close to my cutscene, so I'm gonna start talking about that. And the cutscene is linked directly to the gate matinee. So I did this by adding a camera group to the gate opening matinee, and I linked the camera, well, attached the camera that I wanted to use for the cutscene to it. I then set the view to the view target to the camera actor when the player collides with the trigger box, like I just did now. That lets so that let the matinee off, collide with the trigger box. I then added a delay equal to the length of the gate opening, after which the camera actor is destroyed, and therefore resulting in the view being returned back to the player view, like so. There's a glass plane over here, if you're wondering why I'm able to walk on thin air, basically. Yeah, glass plane here. Also, the background music kind of went off. I need to loop it. Forgot about that. But the background music is just literally a sound cue that I dropped within the level right at the beginning, because the sound doesn't change at all. Well, the background sound doesn't change at all. And the foliage tool. So I created all these by using the foliage tool, except for the big tree. The big tree I kind of did by hand because it looked all nice and stuff, but can't really see it. But yeah, the foliage is there. Also, the terrain tool. I raised terrain for like the ponds and stuff. Like you could see at the beginning of the game, there was a raised terrain, like a little indentation in the ground for the pond, where the water body is. And the textures, so you can see like how the gravel sort of like turns into I don't know, grassy, muddy grass here. So yeah, I used that. I used it right at the beginning of the level as well, so yeah. I also added a bunch of fire particles. They're not my particles though. The only particles that I made were the bubble particles and the Holy Grail particles, which you are about to see right now. So this is pretty much the ending of my game. And once you step to the middle of this room, it will set off a cutscene where it zooms in on the Holy Grail, and the level resets. But yeah, since I mentioned the textures before, like yeah, here they are. Grassy, muddy texture combined with the gravel texture. What else can I talk about? I guess I put invisible walls everywhere by placing cube BSPs, box BSPs, all over the level and like making them invisible in game, so you can't jump out the level. Because when my friends play tested it, they loved jumping up onto the fountain and jumping out of the level, but you're not able to do that anymore, so I just slide about instead. And yeah, that's pretty much it for my Unreal level. So, in this section of the video, I go over how I performed with Unreal, and I will compare it to Stencyl. So, I'll start off with Stencyl, since it was the first piece of software that we used for creating games during our uni year. We used it in the first semester, and I used it for my Taiwo game, which is a 2D action side-scroller, Mega Man-like thing. And yeah, it was an alright piece of software. It ran smoothly on my computer. I did keep running into random non-game related problems with Stencyl, such as like I haven't changed anything with my project, and I left it in its last working state, then I changed machines and it was giving me random errors, then I switched back to my original machine, it was fine. Yeah, also it had like a bunch of memory leaks on my machine, it was pretty stupid. And Stencyl, it's more straightforward when it comes to its UI, everything's laid out quite nicely, there isn't that many options for you to get lost in. Like everything's available like 2 or 3 clicks away from itself. Whereas Unreal, I vaguely used Unreal before, so unlike Stencyl, the layout and the controls were kind of familiar, but there is a lot more options and settings, features within Unreal. So, having said that, I don't really know how all the functions function. So, getting good at Unreal will take a lot longer than getting good at Stencyl would. But Unreal is the more powerful industry standard engine, so that's kind of like expected. So, unlike Stencyl, Unreal didn't give me any random errors within my project, and I didn't need to restart, didn't need to remake my project from the ground up, unlike Stencyl, so that's pretty good. Also, Unreal is really resource intensive. Like, my frames were dropping really hard, and like my Unreal Engine was lagging really hard when using it. Yeah, it was really slow most of the time, so I purchased an SSD, so my wallet took a pretty big hit because of that, and it fixed everything. So yeah, using Unreal with a standard hard drive does kind of like bottleneck it, whereas Stencyl ran perfectly fine, except for the fact that one time it was only allocating 2 gigabytes of my memory to Stencyl, but I just had to go into the settings, and it was like a little box where you typed in how much memory you wanted Stencyl to use. So I put my entire 8 gigs worth of memory in there, so that fixed it, stopped it from crashing. A preferable personal preference of mine is how the code is laid out in Unreal. The node system I prefer a lot over the tileable pillar system Stencyl was going for. It gives it, like, you can space things out a lot more and looks a lot nicer than the really cramped Stencyl like way of coding. But yeah, these are some like more specific things that both programs have going for that I'm going to name now. For example, like transitions. In Unreal, there is no way to achieve transitions, like fade outs, fade ins, without having to use variables and Blueprint. Whereas in Stencyl, you can choose from things like fade out, scroll to the left, scroll to the right, etc., etc. So for a beginner like me, it's quite off-putting because in the long run, Unreal, the way Unreal does it is better because you get more artistic control over what your transitions look like. But for someone like me who just wants a plain, fade out transition, Stencyl was better because it was just pretty much a tick box. Oh, transition, drop that in there, done. Another good thing, another thing is the popularity. The popularity of Unreal is really good because for a complicated piece of software, that means that there is more resources and tutorials available for it. So, for example, like, there was pretty much a tutorial for everything that I needed to do in my Unreal project, whereas Stencyl has hardly any tutorials. It pretty much has, it's close to none. I mean, like, outside of Stencylpedia, there are hardly any Stencyl tutorials. Like, most of them are like foreign Russian tutorials, so they're no good to me because I don't speak Russian. I mean, even the ones on Stencylpedia, they link you to a guy who I can barely understand. And I asked my friends, and they watched his videos and they can barely understand him. And I mean, it's on the official Stencylpedia page, or Stencyl Wiki, can't remember. But yeah, it's pretty bad because trying to get simple things to work in Stencyl were pretty hard since there was hardly any resources online, whereas Unreal, there was pretty much a thing for everything. But yeah, the Unreal has tutorials from both the community and the original, Epic Games Unreal team, which is really good. Another thing is the file sizes. My Unreal project was really big, around 12 gig, after I cut out all of the unnecessary marketplace packs, like all the things that I wasn't using from them. I cut it down to 3.5 gig, so it wasn't that bad. But transferring it onto a USB 2.0, it was takes about 10 minutes. Whereas my own Stencyl game was only 13 megabytes, which takes I don't know, like 2 seconds. So this made it really awkward for me to move my Unreal project about because in lesson you obviously need to import your Unreal project, throw it in the Unreal Projects folder in my documents, so that every lesson copying it from my USB at the beginning onto the computer and vice versa, at the end of the lesson, that took me about 20 minutes of the lesson just copying my files. So yeah, I do prefer Stencyl with how small it is, but it is to be expected because Stencyl is 2D and Unreal is like 3-dimensional. I guess you can make 2-dimensional games, but if you're making 3-dimensional games, it tends to be pretty big. Player characters, I had a lot of trouble creating a player character in Unreal to the point where I ended up using the first-person shooter player blueprint that came with UE and customizing it to the point where I was finally happy with it. But yeah, in Stencyl it's just a matter of importing a actor and then binding keys to him, which was pretty easy. We just open up his little code and it's like, oh, W to make him go in that direction and stuff. So yeah, I do prefer Stencyl when it comes to creating player characters. And in conclusion, I enjoy using both programs. I enjoy Stencyl due to its simplicity, but the fact that Unreal is an industry standard engine that comes with a marketplace and has hundreds of hours worth of tutorials online means that I'll be able to create more things in Unreal, unlike Stencyl, which limits you due to the amount of things available online. It has, like I said before, it has very little tutorials, and the fact that it doesn't support 3D doesn't give me full artistic control over what I'm creating. So, yeah, that about wraps it up.